Now, we get to the really heavy material. This is my bread and butter. This is what I love. This is what I did my doctoral thesis on. I could go for another 2 hours, so don't let me. So what I'm going to do is try to really truncate this to get it down. And I'm going to talk about the manuscript evidence first. When you look at the Quran, you need to start asking some historical questions. Well, all I've done so far for these first few minutes, I've just looked at the internal. I've just looked at the Quran as it is, what it says, whether or not it's relevant. I didn't even get, you notice I stayed away from the violent verses, because I could have gone into a lot of violent verses, like chapter 9, verse 5, slay the unbeliever wherever ye find them, lay in wait for them for every kind of ambush. I could have gone to that verse. I could have gone to chapter 9, verse 29, make war on the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, that's us. I could have gone to chapter 8, verse 39, slay the unbeliever until there is no more fitna, no more unbelief in the land. I could have gone to chapter 47, verse 4, which says to cut off the heads of the unbeliever. Ooh, I could have gone to 149 of these verses in the Quran. Violent verses. But I didn't. Because I want to get into the historical material. See, this is really, I think, the Achilles heel of Islam. If this book is eternal, if this book has never been created, if this book has been preserved perfectly, every word, every letter exactly perfectly preserved, if this book is protected by Allah Himself, then there should not be one word, not one letter changed, right? So let's go to the manuscript evidence. And if I'm going to go to the slide, if we can put up the slides there in the back. I just want to show you, look over on either side. And for those who are at home, we're going to show you from there. Let's look at the slide material. And I want to show you, first of all, what we now know about the manuscripts. Now, it's taken its time to open it, isn't it? Let's look at the 6 earliest manuscripts. But before we do that, we need to ask a question. We need to start from the 7th century. See, the 7th century is where the Muslims tell me that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad over a 22-year period from 610 to 632, right? Okay, so there we have up there, Muhammad dies in 632. Do you see it up on the left side of the screen? When he dies, he is given 7 different Qurans, 7 different what? They're called qira'ats, or they're called ahruf, readings of the Quran, not written down. Nothing had been written down when he was living. But because when he died, there was a problem. And because when they had a war way up in Azerbaijan, a number of Meccans and Medinans went up to Azerbaijan and they met some Iraqis and some Syrian Muslims. And when they went into the mosque, they heard the Quran recited differently. And they came to blows, fisticuffs. And the Meccans and Medinans came back down. Udaifa come all the way back down to Medina. And there was Uthman, the caliph. He was the king at that time in 652. And he says to Uthman, what are we going to do? We cannot have many Qurans. We heard many Qurans being recited. We cannot have many Qurans. We must have just one Quran. So they got Zayd ibn Thabit, who was the secretary of Muhammad, to come and rewrite the Quran in the Qurayshi dialect. Now, the Qurayshi dialect, we're told, is the dialect that was used there in Mecca and Medina, in Hijaz, that central part of Arabia. And so that was supposedly, that was the dialect that Muhammad would have spoken. So therefore, it must be the dialect that's in heaven, right? If Muhammad received this, it must have been received in that dialect. So they did that. They wrote it in that dialect, and then they sent a copy of this to 5 different cities. So let's just take a look. Let's look and see what they are. So when we go up there, these were sent to 5 cities. There it is. You have Mecca, Medina, Basra, then you have Baghdad, and then or Kufa, and then you have Damascus. You see all the 3 green circles? So 2 of them are in Saudi Arabia. What is Saudi Arabia today? They're in the Hijaz. And then 1 is in southern Iraq. What is Iraq today? 1 is in Kufa, which is just south of Baghdad. And then the other one is way up in Syria in Damascus. 5 Qurayshi Qurans, all in the Qurayshi dialect. And then he burned all the other ones that disagreed. Burned. Does anybody here speak Arabic? Habil. You know what I'm going to say next. You're probably the only one that's going to understand what I'm going to say next. But you know that in order to have a dialectical difference in an Arabic orality, if you're going to orally say something, if you're from Iraq, and if you hear someone from Egypt speak, there's 2 different dialects, right? You have the Iraqi dialect and you have the Egyptian dialect, right? Now, to write that down, what do you need to use to write the difference between the Iraqi and the Egyptian? To write it down, what you have to have? Okay, but what kind of letters? You have to have something besides the letters. Vowels, the dhamma, the kasra, and the fatha, right? The u, the ah, the e, the ah, the u, and the e sound. They're three vowels. And then you also have to have dots, the diacritical dots, to make the na, ta, tha, ba. Yeah, we'll get into that. So can you see already there were no diacritical marks, there were no vowelization in the 7th century. They didn't exist. So hold that under your hat. I'll explain that in just about 5 minutes. So you have these 5. Then why would you burn manuscripts that didn't have any vowels or dots if they disagreed? How can they disagree? They all have the same letters. Am I correct, Habib? Habib, if they're all the same letters, then how could they be burned? Because burning means they're burning manuscript. You're not burning someone's talking. You're not burning their tongues. You're not burning themselves. You're burning manuscripts, which assumes, therefore, there must have been dots and vowels that early. Ooh, hold on to that. Now, hold on a minute. So these 5 are sent there, right? But then we're told in the traditions that suddenly some more start to appear. One appears up there by a guy named Ubay ibn Ka'b, and it has 116 surahs, not 114 like we have today. And then another appears there in Baghdad by a guy named Ibn Masud, and it has 110 surahs. That's not 114. And then another appears in Basra. There's the other red circle, and it has 114, but not the same 114 that we have there in Mecca and Medina where the green circles are. So already you're getting different Qur'ans appearing in the 7th century that don't agree with each other. This is their own traditions telling me this. These are the Islamic traditions that are written in the 9th and 10th century, redacted back to the 7th century. So already, are you seeing problems here? I thought that there was supposed to be one Qur'an totally preserved, not one word, not one letter changed. So within their own traditions, I'm finding there's already contradictions. There are different Qur'ans here. 116 surahs, 114 surahs, 110 surahs. Which is the real one? Which is the one that's in heaven? Ooh, Can you see immediately that we have a difficulty? So there were 5 Qur'ans in the 7th century, Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. We don't even have one of them today. Not one exists. Not one of them exists. But something happened between the 7th and 8th century. These start to appear. Now, these are the earliest manuscripts, in the extant manuscripts that we have today. That's the Topkapi there in the Topkapi Museum in Turkey. That's probably the best of all of them. I have that one. I have a facsimile. I don't have that one. It's priceless. I have the facsimile of that in my house. The one next to it is the Samarkand, which is in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. And then we have the Ma'il. Can you see there on the slide? That's the one that's in London. That is, Ma'il means slanted because it has a slanted script. It's a Hijazi script. That one is right there in the Riblack Gallery in London. But when you look at these, let me just go back and show you something. The Topkapi is the best. It is about 99% of the Quran. But it is dated to 749. That is the mid-8th century. That's 100 years after Uthman. Are you following me? Muhammad died in 632. So we're talking about a good 120 years after Muhammad. That one on the left appears. You notice it doesn't have any dots and vowels. Are you seeing that? The one on the right is dated to a little bit earlier than that, about 20 years earlier than that. It also doesn't have dots and vowels, but it is missing most of the Quran. It only goes up to chapter 43. And in those 43 chapters, only 1 chapter is complete. 16 don't even exist. So you can see it is full of problems. It has enormous grammatical mistakes written by men who didn't know Arabic very well. The Ma'il Quran is only up to chapter 43 as well. It contains about half the Quran. And it also has manuscript variants. The one on the right is the Petropolitanus in the Bibliothèque Nationale there in Paris in France. And it is controlled by Dr. François Doroche. And it is only 23% of the Quran. You notice not any of these Qurans are complete, except possibly the Topkapi. And it is dated to around 720, so the early 8th century. It's one of the earlier ones, but only 25%. The Al-Huzayni one that you see there on the left, that one is in Cairo, in Egypt. It is a monumental text. That's why it's huge. It is dated to the 9th or 10th century, not even to the 8th century. And then the most exciting one is the one on the right. That's the Sana'a manuscript that was discovered in 1975. when they were cleaning out a dome there in the Sana Dome, where they opened the trapdoor and all these manuscripts fell to the ground, amongst which were 3 of these manuscripts. These manuscripts were written in the Hijazi script. Take a look at that one there. Can you see there's a yellow mark there? Can you see the yellow mark on it? Above that yellow mark is Surah 19. Below that yellow mark is Surah 22. What happened to Surah 20 and 21? So 2 surahs are missing. 2 chapters are missing. On the left side, Surah 20 begins, but if you look at it very carefully, it's a completely different script. It's a much, much later script. So there's about 60 years between the right page and the left page. Is that a problem? And what's more, take a look at every one of those orange marks. See those orange marks? Every time you see that orange mark, that is what we call a manuscript variant. That means a word or phrase that is different from that book than this one that I have in my hand right here. This is the Hafs text, this one right here. So you can see there's a real problem here with these. Why? Well, let's conclude. None of them are from the 7th century. That's the first problem. Not any of them are from the time of Uthman. None of them are complete. None of them completely agree with each other. None of them completely agree with the current 1924 Hafs text. This is the 1924 Hafs text. This is the official text that was only made official less than 100 years ago. And all of them have hundreds and even thousands of subsequent manuscript variants. So, when was the Quran formed? Well, Muslims say this one is the Quran. You probably heard about this in 2015. They found the Birmingham folios. Remember this? Were you there when that was discovered? 2015. All over the world, they finally found the original Quran. Why? Well, this Quran was dated by carbon dating out of the Oxford labs from 568 to 645. Muhammad was born in 570, died in 632, so it covers his life. Well, that sounds pretty reasonable. And there you had Dr. David Thomas, who is the curator for the Birmingham Library. He says the writer of this manuscript could well have known the Prophet Muhammad. He would have seen him probably. He would maybe have heard him preach. He may have known him personally. And that really is quite a thought to conjure. Here's the problem. No one's looked at it. This is not a complete Quran. It's only 2 pages, front and back. It's only 2 folios. And very well could be from 568 to 645. I don't dispute that. I pretty much trust carbon dating on it. But take a look at what it says. When you look at these 2 pages, they only make up 33 verses. 33 verses out of 6,238 does not make a Quran. Even the 3 chapters that it is a part of, chapter 18, 19, and 20, there are 343 verses in those 3 chapters. This is only 33. This is just 10% of those chapters. But what's interesting is look and see what they say. Chapter 18, so verses 17 to 31, is a story of 7 sleepers of Ephesus. This was written in 521 AD. Muhammad was born in 570. This predates Muhammad, it predates the Quran, it predates Islam. The second part, surahs 19 to 91, is from Proto-Evangelium of James, which comes from 145 AD. That is the 2nd century, folks. This is a good 300 to 400 years before the Quran. And then the chapter 20, verse 1 to 40, is the story of Moses, which comes from the Old Testament, straight out of the Old Testament, from 1400 BC. Can you see? These 3 stories are not Islamic. They're pre-Islamic. Are you following me? And of course they're written in Arabic, because that is the lingua franca of the 7th century. But these are nothing to do with Muhammad, and they are nothing to do with the Quran. They were lifted out of Christian literature and interposed into the Quran. Ooh, I've just jumped the gun. Hold on a minute. We're going to get to that. Let's don't jump ahead, because I don't want to spoil what I'm going to be saying later. So let's...